All right, Black People in Cryptocurrency Live.
Hello, Bob Ponce. How you
Hello.
doing?
I'm good, Deidre. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. This is going to be a really interesting conversation today. We've got the CEO of Conduit, Ryan Robinson. And just to give a little backstory, how I kind of ran across Ryan, um, I was doing a list in 2019 trying to find founders and people who said they were professionals in blockchain and cryptocurrency for Black Blockchain Summit, which was a conference out of DC. And so I thought I was going to find like maybe 50 people and I would be good and golden. And then we end up coming up with a list of about 100 people for that conference. But Ryan, I found on MIT's news site, and I'm saying, oh, African American or this Black person, MIT, world's first quantum engineer. So a lot of times when I add people to the list, I don't necessarily connect with them, but I saw he was on LinkedIn. And I think one of the first questions I posed to him was like, how do you know you're the world's first quantum engineer and then that kind of set the stage for our conversation.
Got to
But
check those receipts, right?
exactly, how do you? That's a wild assertion. I know it's on MIT's news site, but how do you know? So it's always great to have Ryan Robinson here because not only is he brilliant, is his team brilliant. I got to meet virtually some members of his team as well. But they're young, they have a positive attitude, and they really want to make a change in this world. So we're going to look at the connection between quantum computing and even a relationship between cryptocurrency, a conversation that we had with Ryan. So without further ado, we'd like to introduce Ryan Robinson,
Robinson.
CEO and founder of Conduit.
Wait, hold on. Let me do it right. Hold on.
Once again, back is the incredible
Ryan Robinson.
Wait, you're muted.
Thank you. I want that introduction everywhere I go. The gym, the bank.
Everyone deserves theme.
Yeah, exactly. Step into the building with the swagger now. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, let's get to it, Ryan. For those who don't know, give a little bit about your, how Conduit was started, because I know it started at MIT, how you end up in Boston, and a little something about yourself and the company, and then we'll get into a conversation of what you're doing.
Absolutely. So Conduit actually started when I was a sophomore at MIT. I was studying under Eric Lander, who actually just got confirmed as an advisor to President Biden. He's also an advisor to President Obama as well. And he's the founder of the Broad Institute. So those who don't know, it's like one of the most premier research institutions in the world. So he teaches at MIT, typical. And so I took his biology class way back, and I was just really inspired by how computers and biology come together. This was actually talking about crypto. We had the bio part in there, then the zeitgeist, if you will, and the ideas of that time period, but also crypto. MIT did this project called the Bitcoin Project, where they gave every student $100 worth of Bitcoin just to see what we do with it. And so for me, I'm someone where if I don't understand something, I really just want to understand it. And so me not understanding, I said, okay, what exactly is this? And this was 2014. So there wasn't the same vernacular ecosystem that exists today. And so for me, it was more so conversations with other nerdy people and software engineers, and everyone had their own take on it. For me, my take on it was that at least the what's called the secure hash algorithm, the kind of the crux of it, in my opinion, is really kind of like a math competition. So context, I actually used to do math competitions in high school. So that was a little the insight onto the Bitcoin. And so from there, it was pretty straightforward. It's okay, well, why don't we make a math competition for other people's problems? Why don't we all compete to solve each other's problems? And, use what's called co-opetition in game theory to really get the best results out of people and solve important problems. So that's where Conduit came out of in 2014. Then I graduated in 2017, as you guys know, world's first quantum engineer. I'll talk about that in a second. And it's been working with it ever since. Going to the quantum engineering aspect, so the way that all came about was obviously really fascinated by quantum physics. Specifically, one of my inspirations was Richard Feynman. And there's a book I read called Quantum Man, which is his biography, not his autobiography, but a biography about him. And it was just so inspired and just fascinated by how the different areas he contributed to. He was there during the Manhattan Project and also the development of computers. And as many people in quantum computing know, he's basically the father of quantum computing. There's some people before him, but he's like the one really well known for it. He actually didn't call it a quantum computer. He called it a universal simulator. A universal simulator. So the idea was quantum computing can simulate the universe in a way that normal computers, classical computers cannot, or is very challenging for them. And so he did that in basically this conference at MIT in 1980 called the first annual conference of the mathematics of physics. And literally just created a field basically in a Q&A session. Basically, it's as if you ask someone a question and they just create a whole new field to solve it. So it was really cool. And so me seeing that, I said, okay, well, this is an area where I felt like I could really contribute to, not just so much in the academic space, but really in the sort of bringing it to the masses, making it cool, making sure everyone can use it and understand it. And so that's what we're doing now with our work with the with Nano Splash, with the White House. So it's just pretty cool.
When you went to MIT, what did you major in? I mean, I know you don't country, but were you studying philosophy or what else were you studying at the time?
So I studied a little bit of everything, as you might guess from my background. So I came in and I was studying something called mechatronics. MIT has one of the few, I don't know about now, but at least back then, just a few years ago, but back then they were one of the only colleges that offered a course in it. And it's mechatronics. It's a combination of everything. I call it the Tony Stark major. So you have mechanical engineering, you've got electrical engineering, systems engineering, material engineering. So when I say I literally studied everything, I mean, I literally took a class called how to make almost anything at MIT. Like that's what I mean. Like I literally took a class on how to make almost anything. And I came in with a lot of credit from AP classes, context. I was salutatorian at my high school, Flanagan High School. Shout out to you guys, Flanagan in South Florida. And I came with a lot of credit. I think we actually, that year, we had some like the highest GPAs the school had ever had. Context, I had taken all the AP classes they had. So I was just in the library my senior year. So go to MIT, got a bunch of credit. And I had one of my friends, his name is Cyril, Cyril, almost like Cyril, but Cyril. And we were just really competitive friends. And he was super brilliant. And at MIT, there's this term called MIT Smart, which means that you're smart even for MIT. And so that means that really means you're masochistic. That's really what it means. That's really what it means. But it means that you're taking twice the course load. So at MIT, the average course load's 4 classes. I was taking 7, 8 classes a semester, which was pretty crazy. And so by the time I was end of my sophomore year, I basically finished my undergraduate part. And so I was taking all graduate classes. Context, like I was taking special relativity my freshman year, quantum computing my sophomore year, for instance, did dark matter research my freshman year, and finished that again in 2 years. Studied under Seth Lloyd as my advisor on the quantum space. So my thing is quantum engineering. So it's not just quantum computing. I also studied applied quantum physics, quantum philosophy of mathematics, a bunch of other type things like that. And then on the humanities side, I also did international literature. So everything from Latin American politics, Pablo Neruda, to like Chinese cinema classics from first wave, second wave, third wave in China. For instance, just to give you a scope, French cinema. So I just had a whole gamut of experiences. And actually my thesis was in gender bias in the workplace. Mm-hmm. I was taking a managerial psychology class at Sloan, MIT School of Business. So yeah, so a lot of different things. That's why I say everything.
Wow. Now, how do you connect? Okay, let's back up a bit. People hear quantum a lot. How do you explain to a 5-year-old what exactly is quantum? Because most time you hear people of quantum everyday work, they may know a couple of years ago that Google supposedly leaked some documents, but they think of sci-fi. That's all they, you mentioned, Tony Stark. That's what you think of. Right. So what is so special about this quantum? What is it?
So there's 2 questions there. So what's special about quantum and how would I explain it to a 5-year-old? So how I would explain it to a 5-year-old would be basically quantum physics is how the world works on a very small level, so small that we can't even see it, super small. And so depending on their science knowledge, first thing they might say, okay, well, if I can't see it, how does that work? Well, I say it's kind of like air. Like air, we know that it's there. We breathe it in, you can feel it. You blow it out, you can feel it on your hand. right? But you don't see it. And so again, there's one accepting the fact that there's a world that exists beyond what we can physically experience in our own bodies without instruments like microscopes, et cetera. So that's the first thing you got to acknowledge. And two, again, is at a miniature level here, quantum. Now, quanta, so quantum comes from the Latin word quanta, which means, of course, account. So think quantitative, so it's numbers. So now that brings it to what is special about quantum. There's a lot special about quantum, so I'm going to give you obviously like some of the simple version of it. So one of the special things is it's discrete. It's discrete, which is a very fancy math word. It just means that it's like watching a movie. So when you watch a movie, I don't know how they do it now, so this might be different now. But back in the day, it was just a bunch of frames. Even your monitor kind of works like this. So it's frame, and it's just done so fast that again, your eye really makes it one movie, one full motion. But really the universe works like it's really frames. So in a way I'd explain quantum is really looking at those specific frames of the universe or frames of a movie versus seeing it as a continuous movie. So you can kind of pause and say, let's look at this frame right here and understand how that works. And so what we experience on the macroscopic level is, again, all those frames coming together. So in other words, all these quantum particles acting together. And one more way I explain it is that these particles are very unique, the same way that, if you look at studies. So if you look at studies about the average like fertility rate, the average fertility rate would say it's like 2.1, 2.3, 2.5. You're basically never going to find someone that has 2.1 kids. You're not going to find someone that has 2.3 kids. You're going to have someone that has 1 kid, 2 kids, 3 kids, 10 kids, 5 kids. It's going to be arranged. It's a discrete, right? Discrete units. But on average, the total might be 2.3.
Wow, it's really interesting. So before we got started, you said one of the things you might want to talk about is this relationship between quantum and cryptocurrencies. I want you to zero in on what you wanted to convey with that before we get straight to what Conduit's doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. So quantum is really powerful. I think, and to some degree, I think this is kind of crazy to say considering my position, but I think it is a little overhyped in terms of how it affects crypto, at least right now. And the reason I say that is because the big paranoia or hype around quantum is that it can, of course, break the blockchain. People who probably have seen articles around this. And so let me talk there really, really quick. So quantum, when people say that, so those who don't know, what they're saying is that basically, I'm giving you the simple version here, is that blockchain works by computing power. Computing power is really kind of the currency of cryptocurrency, meaning that our traditional, typical financial institutions work by verification, third-party verification. We've all seen this. You've got Duo, you got to send a text, you got to verify this, you got to verify that. So in other words, if I want to send money to Bob, for instance, then I might need to verify my identity. His account needs to verify his social, et cetera. There's verification by a third party. That's my point. And then you got the government somewhere in there. So with blockchain, it's the verification, instead of that being a third party that could be corruptible, has biases, et cetera, has moral hazards. Anyone who remembers 2009 knows what I mean, is that the blockchain, you have this more human, non-human device mechanism to verify transactions, which is, again, as a blockchain, which uses computing power. To override that, one way to override that is basically by amassing so much computing power that you can rewrite this ledger, rewrite the history books, if you will, the history books. And so it'd be as if, anyway, I don't know if this might be too old for some people, but Star Trek with the Borg, and they're all one network. And so for people who get the reference, it's
like iRobot.
Yeah, like iRobot.
Daggone Vicky.
Yeah, so
everything.
More modern. So iRobot. And so imagine what people's threat or fear of quantum is that basically quantum would act more or less in this scenario like a virus that would have the robots doing something different than what they was supposed to be doing or what's real, quote unquote. The reason I say it's overhyped is because one is that, Bitcoin now is just so powerful that it would just be quantum it just isn't there yet. We're just too nascent. Maybe in 20 years, something like that, like maybe in some period in the future, but I'm saying in a near term aspect, it's really not a immediate threat. To give you specific context is according to this article, I think it's called Coinist, I can put it in the chat, is the flops of the Bitcoin network is over 86 exaflops. 86 exaflops. Actually, hold on, let me double check that. Sorry, 86,000 exaflops. So it's really, yeah, I was like, let me check that because it's
86,000.
Yeah, 86,000. It's huge. It's really huge. So to that point is that you would need quantum computing, even though you see it on LinkedIn, oh, we're doing some of this quantum and that quantum. In terms of the actual computation, specifically the algorithm, this is going to be important for anyone learning about this. Shor's algorithm is the specific algorithm that quantum computers can run that would be able theoretically to break blockchain, to rewrite the blockchain. And so that was developed, discovered, and invented, whatever word you want to use, by Peter Shor at MIT in the 90s. So actually took classes under him too while I was at MIT. Him, Isaac Schwang, Seth Lloyd, Scott Aronson. So those are some of my mentors in the quantum space.
So what is, in terms of Shor, how many flops is that? So if we're at 86, how many?
Oh man,
what's the distance?
You would need thousands of qubits to really do Shor's algorithm. And part is because quantum computers are what computer scientists would call noisy, meaning basically they're really error prone, meaning that, again, very, very powerful, but it's not very focused. So in other words, in a more layman context, is you got a quantum computer in front of you right now, is that it could run, it could render some image, say this might be more for people that are animators. It could render some image, render the movie, but it's going to be the wrong movie. So you've got to do it over and over again. There's something called error correcting codes. So in other words, if you're making a quantum computer right now, you got to look at the qubits to store your data. And then you've got to have error correcting codes that, by definition, make sure that it's giving you the right result. And in short, that basically looks like you're basically running it over and over and over again. So
basically, I do quantum in my kitchen when I'm like late and I'm running. I'm like, oh, shoot, drop the pot.
Exactly.
It hit the floor with force. I was moving fast, but it wasn't exactly as accurate as putting it on the stove.
So what's the definition of a quantum engineer?
So a quantum engineer is someone who really looks at the world in a quantum level, on a quantum way. The one that people always bring up to me is the Avengers with Ant-Man.
The quantum realm.
Right.
It's very that's more question marky in terms of the science.
Well,
that's like a Neil deGrasse Tyson
it's a comic book. Yes, absolutely.
we need Neil for that one. But so what quantum engineer, my point being is that quantum computers are one thing. What Ant-Man does in that movie, that'd be more of a quantum engineer, meaning that you're applying quantum to different aspects. So give you an idea, is quantum doesn't just apply to computation, doesn't just apply to computers. There's also quantum biology, there's quantum chemistry, and actually one quantum example I'll bring up is photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is probably the most cited example of quantum biology because, to keep it simple, plants use quantum physics to basically use the light to create the energy which we then eat. So it's actually a big part of our daily lives. Another one that's really interesting that actually relates to the body and aging and health and stuff like that is there's actually quantum tunneling in your mitochondria. Quantum tunneling and I'll talk about what that is in a second. So quantum tunneling is one of the unique aspects, going back to your one of your earlier questions, what's unique about quantum. So this is a classically cited example in quantum, but so in the real world or in the macroscopic world, if you're trying to run through a wall, it's not going to work, and I think we've all had that experience.
Now we move to the flash.
Right.
Run through the dead wall.
Right. Or a sliding glass door. We've all had maybe that experience. You didn't know it was there, and then boom, you're hoping nobody's around to watch that. And so between flash and sliding glass door, but on a quantum level, if you're a quantum particle, you could theoretically tunnel, meaning move through that thing, that piece of mass, that wall, the door, etc. And so there's a few different reasons for that, but I'll talk about this. So that's the major effect, quantum tunneling. So in short, in part of your cells in the mitochondria, there's quantum tunneling. And part of actually what aging is, there's science is still out on what aging means. But one recent paper talks about how aging can be, one aspect of aging is basically when the quantum tunneling in your cells, particularly in the mitochondria, basically goes awry, it goes wrong. So what happens is that the way quantum tunneling works, so again, when we try and run through a wall, it doesn't work. For quantum particles, if there's a high amount of potential energy that, and this is the context you can think of that as resistance, then it's still going to be really hard for it to go through that wall. So in your cells with the mitochondria and quantum tunneling, there's actually two quantum tunnels or two quantum wells. And so what happens in part of aging is that your basically your cells, parts of the mitochondria, parts of the cells in the energy transference transferred through on the quote unquote wrong side, the wrong quantum well, creating, in short, a damage and mismatch of DNA inside your cells. I know that's a lot. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. No, I was actually trying to Google something because Facebook. I don't think I'm going to find it really quickly, but Google actually showed me something today. They gave, I think it was I don't know if it was a mouse or a guinea pig, some type of specific protein, and it extended the ones that they gave the protein to their lifespan by 23%. And they were saying how that have implications for, humans down the road. Now, I don't know if it was a mouse, guinea pig, whatever it was. So I was like, trying to look real quick, and I was like, oh, this is related. But let's skip to Conduit. I know you say you founded in 2014, but in 2017, at some point, you kind of switched it towards a medical focus. So what's been happening with Conduit, and share a little bit about your team's background and some of your accomplishments. It's time to toot your own horn, so to speak.
Absolutely, thank you. So the way the bio part came into it, so we always actually kind of had we had the bio in mind. So that starts with the origin story with Eric Lander. For those who've read the magazine feature in Re-Engineer, shout out to Re-Engineer, is also part of my family members in my past who passed away from diseases that could have been prevented. So with that in mind, I was always interested in particularly in impact, and health is one of the best ways to help impact people. And so we really kind of works in phases. And so that's why a lot of people who've been following us is like, okay, well, there's a new kind of bio aspect to it. What's really been going on is really Conduit's ultimate vision is to bring, again, quantum technology to the masses. Hence quantum engineering. We study quantum engineering, etc. And so that works in phases because, again, like I was saying in the beginning, quantum computing is not there yet. Quantum computing is not there. So it's, in other words, how do we get to this future? So for we do it, it's really high level. It's very visionary type work because we're building our way to this future. So we knew from the get-go we want to do something with health. We want to do impact. We want to bring quantum to the masses. But guess how do we get there? So starting off 2017, where I really was focusing on, started to focus on Conduit, was okay, how do we get the computing power to simulate all these quantum effects? So as if we had a quantum computer, So let me pause it for a second. So we're talking about quantum computers and how powerful they were. Like, wait, Ryan, I don't understand. You can simulate it. Quantum computers, yes, can be simulated. It's when they're very, 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 very big that it gets harder to simulate them. It's very, very, very big. It gets harder to simulate them. So we created this, what we call collective computing, which is this network that can simulate quantum computing because it's just so powerful. That's one. Then from two, we then use that to develop physical products like Nano Splash that have a nano, miniature-esque angle to their science and how they work. So specifically what happened is, it really with the pandemic, is I think what really made these movements move a lot faster than we actually expected ourselves, is because we were actually invited to work on the pandemic this time last year, I guess like March of last year, because we were known already for drug discovery. So one of our Forbes articles would be a part of drug discovery, Conduit. And so that was already we were kind of known for that. And particularly in terms of computational simulations of medications, of molecules. So again, the quantum part, you can see that comes in again. So once the pandemic happened, you actually were invited to work on this. And particularly we ended up working with the White House, the High Performance Computing Consortium, which, as it sounds like a big deal. Anytime there's like a long name like that, it's a pretty big deal. But basically it's all these groups of people or projects, 46 projects exactly, working on COVID and trying to find some way to stop it, create a treatment, etc. They say something about it that we didn't know. And so it's led by Logan Thrasher-Collins, who's my CTO, and I'll talk about him in a second. And so we're actually looking at the viral membrane, and the curvature of the membrane, which in short allows us to look at different medications that could help stop COVID, which is a really, really big deal. And another big deal for us is that it's also with Amazon, Microsoft, not just the White House, DOD, DOE, it's all the big companies you might expect. So it's been pretty cool for us as a younger company, smaller company, to, in a matter of a few years, be working with the White House and again, all these big companies. We've also published research in quantum. Actually, one of our engineers, Pranav Carry-on, he's in India. He actually published a paper with one of his professors on using quantum neural networks to predict future outbreaks of COVID. He used quantum neural networks to predict future outbreaks of COVID. So we've actually done a lot of research in the COVID space. Some of our advisors, Bart Kellerman, Tim Ireland, they've used financial algorithms to do a similar thing, predict outbreaks, et cetera. So we've really just been all hands on deck. Speaking about Logan for a second, Logan's my CTO. He's a right-hand guy. He's awesome. Really, I mean, this guy's really just a super genius, someone you'll be reading about in history books years from now. So
yeah, he did a TED Talk in high school. I
did.
I went to his website and I was like, high school?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I was like, I should be able to understand this. And I watched it. I was like, I can't understand this.
Yeah.
It's great.
Exactly. So he's someone you want working on a pandemic. He's someone you want working on a pandemic for sure. And so he won something called the International Science Engineering Fair. For those who are familiar with that competition, it's like one of those type of competitions where one, you have to be really, really smart, obviously, to win it. And two, it's like one of those competitions where if you win it, you can kind of go to any college in the world. It's like that level of a competition for high schoolers. And he won it specifically in microbiology. He was 16 years old. Was invited to the Nobel Prize ceremony, again, 16, 17 years old. Actually has a planet named after him. Serious, can't make this up. Wouldn't even think to make this up. And what else? I mean, he's a published neuroscientist and he just graduated undergraduate college 2 times over. And speaking more on the qualitative, I mean, I've seen him. He's actually with Nano Splash. I mean, when we're working right now with a lab called Avomine, AVOME.
So back up a minute. Tell people what Nano Splash is, because you mentioned Nano Splash already, and people are probably like, I don't even know what that is.
Right, they're like, what is that? So yeah, I'm so used to talking to you about it, so I have to like remember it. So Nano Splash is this COVID test that was basically pioneered by Logan, who I was talking about, and it's this bottle, and you spit into it. Actually, a bottle here. You spit into it, and the chemical inside changes colors in minutes to tell you if you have COVID or not. So it's a game changer. It's simple, it's easy to use, it's accurate, it's made for at-home use. Big deal. And also it can.
Don't you think people will prefer the one where they stick the thing way up their nose?
Oh man, I actually went with
never gonna go out of style.
Man, it's funny you mentioned that. I just went with my mom to get COVID tested yesterday for her. Because you got allergies. That's the thing now, if you get allergies, you don't know. If someone coughs, sneezes, you don't know what's going on. And she didn't know what the test was like. She never got tested before. And so the nurse is, okay, lean back. And she has this huge stick. You guys have seen this stick, right? It's a huge stick. It's like a awful Q-tip, like a mutant Q-tip. And I had to like hold her hand because it was, basically the nurse has to like pick your nose with this stick.
Wait a minute. Why didn't she take Nano Splash?
Exactly. So we're actually gonna be out in the next few months by the end of the year. So it's really exciting. We actually have this big event coming up. It's called A Mother's Kiss. It's a charity event. We're doing a charity dinner. We're doing down in Miami, where I'm from. It's gonna be streamed online, and we're actually gonna be raising money to provide free testing, particularly to mothers, because mothers, as anyone who's been paying attention the last year, have been most affected by COVID, particularly with childcare. Childcare has been the big thing, knowing who you can trust your kid around, childcare centers being closed. So this is just to kind of help them out, in part because, one, everyone's got a mom. Moms are awesome. And also because moms have been the first, particularly women in general, have been some of our first investors, our biggest supporters. So this is really us giving back, doing our thing. So it's called A Mother's Kiss. It's June 26th in Miami. So you can go to our website and sign up.
So back up a bit about Nano Splash and Logan's contribution. You on the diagnostic side in terms of Conduit, but what about in terms of like vaccines and everything? What are your opinions of the vaccines that Americans have a choice of versus what might be available elsewhere. And then I guess I'll get to the other question about the new strands in a minute.
Right, absolutely. So with the new vaccine, so it's pretty interesting because I think that it's great that it's been able to give people peace of mind. I think that's been really nice considering the last year. It's been pretty crazy, both politically, biologically, every which way. Grocery stores. Remember we went to grocery stores, the toilet paper's gone. It's like, why are we buying all the toilet paper? I mean, come on. I would think the food first. I would think the food first. Why the toilet paper? That's just messed up. But anyways, I think that's been great that people have that peace of mind now. Places are reopening. That's really nice. But I think we also still have to be cautious and aware because these new strands, like you had just mentioned, are coming out. They are there. The strand in India, there's obviously multiple strands, but some of the major strands in India have already been proven to be vaccine resistant. Now, let me clarify that with also saying that they have shown medications that still can combat it, but it's already, again, shown vaccine resistance. And that's not even talking about the South African, it's talking about the strand in Vietnam. So, I mean, it's just, this is what viruses do. They mutate. And so, again, testing and still being cautious is really important. So it's good we're getting this kind of breath of fresh air, but in reality, I would still recommend everybody to just be vigilant, stay safe. Don't, maybe be a little relaxed, but still be vigilant, still wash your hands. I personally wear a mask. But I think it's really gonna be important to have both the testing and the vaccine, because again, you're gonna have it where at some point where the vaccine resistant strands are going to reduce the effectiveness. And they're already talking about this. I mean, the CEO of Moderna already said it like a few weeks ago or a couple of days ago. The strands are coming. They're coming.
They're more than coming. They're here. I know that during March and April, the strands were the fastest. They were spreading more than the original strain here, and but it's interesting because this really comes right down into the wheelhouse of what you were saying before about using quantum computing to be a neural net to check out this breakout, because we're at a phase now where the vaccine surveillance has to be about every strand. So it's not like, we think of it's the COVID-19 virus or it's the SARS-CoV-2 virus, but it's really at this point in time, it's a multiple number of variations of the viruses. And as you said, most of them have shown to, the Pfizer and the Moderna seem to be resistant to mostly everything. But, there's Pfizer, there's Moderna, there's Johnson & Johnson. Right. And that's just here in the U.S. There's AstraZeneca. There are the Chinese have two.
I think Russia has one too, I believe.
And I'm given to understand that there are some Cuban vaccines that are not being talked about. So there's a lot of product out there, and each one of them are going to have a different effect on whatever virus is in your area or not in your area.
And Ryan, you've given, to me privately, I've actually written about some of the things that you said. Can you explain, how these mutations occur and why, as Americans, we may be susceptible to quite a wide range of strands that other people are not?
Absolutely. So, I'm trying to remember all the things I was saying. So, I think I'll talk about the last question first. Is I think one of the reasons that we're so susceptible to the strands is we're so diverse as a country. So you can have a look at just the numbers of cases, the death rate. America's unfortunately leading in all those cases and in, as far as we know, cases and deaths. Even though, again, we're not the most populous country. Keep in mind, again, other countries might not be accurately keeping up with what's going on, the deaths and the cases. So keep that in mind. But my point is that because we as a country have it's good in its own way, but because we have so many different states that have their different, opinions. So for instance, in Florida, the governor, I think something really close to this is where, he outlawed the sort of executive order where mayors and smaller officials under him couldn't do anything that went against his orders around masks and pandemic, et cetera. And so you have that. Then meanwhile, you have maybe Boston that's more that we had a curfew, where you had to be in by, I think, 9 or 10, depending on what time period of pandemic you were looking at. So again, you have this stratified approach. And then actually bringing it back to quantum, one of the papers, again, actually one of our engineers, Pranav, did was in quantum game theory. quantum game theory. And long story short, it talks about how this is pretty, the conclusion is pretty straightforward, is that we all need to really cooperate to attack this thing, because it's to give, going back to what Bob was saying about the strands. So what I think is really important to remember is that the virus isn't actually a living thing. It's not considered to be life by scientists. And in fact, Corona specifically isn't even considered to be a species. It's considered to be a quasi-species, which means that it mutates so fast that you can't even really say, okay, this right here, that's Corona, that's COVID, because it changes so fast. To give you an idea, and again, I can put the link in the chat, is a virus, so there's an example in the study that you'll see is the West Nile virus. Say a mosquito bites you, you've got West Nile virus. That one virus, or a few viruses that it injects you in, within a few days, about 3 days, you're talking more viruses in your body than all the stars in the Milky Way combined. And one person's body in 3 days. And so with that, that's just one person. So now you're talking about, with going back to the United States, is again, we're so stratified. We have all these different requirements from the state level, the government level, or the federal level, the district level, et cetera. So you've got all these kind of conflicting strategies going on. And then also, usually diverseness of the immune system. Your immune system is the most personal thing about you, at least in my opinion, in my experience, because your DNA, yes, DNA is super unique. We've all seen the CSI, we've all seen the shows. I got your DNA, you did it, but they're twins though. They're twins. Your immune system is not only unique to your DNA, but also to where you've gone, where you travel. So if you have two twins, one stayed home their whole life, the other one traveled, they're gonna have two dramatically different immune systems. And so I think the challenge is that with vaccines, treatments in general, is, hey, how do I make this thing that is so universal when the immune systems are so unique and individualized?
Yeah, and you mentioned the environments. I know that there are a number of people that when they're figuring out what types of medicines will work well in what regions, even of the United States, they take tap water into consideration, and how well it can absorb in your body based on what type of water. My brother's in the water business. I hear that all the time.
Actually, I have spring water right now.
Yes. Oh, he'd have a conversation about you. Just drink purified water and just add your own vitamins in it. That way that's what it is.
Right. That's always a challenge.
Vitamin enhanced water. Because when was the last time you drank from a spring?
Exactly. I was wondering. I started looking for springs.
Some animal walked through.
I got this the other day. I genuinely started looking around for springs. I said, I haven't seen a spring in years, if ever. Probably in the movies.
I'm telling you, at least you're closer to kind of where they get it from.
Yeah.
Massachusetts, kind of, sort of. So what's up with what's new in terms of Conduit? What stage are you at with the patent with Nano Splash, the saliva test for COVID? What can we expect with that?
So the stage we're at now is, so again, for our long-term development, we're actually pretty close to our vision of bringing quantum to the masses, and a big spectrum on a big picture view, specifically again with Nano Splash, is that it uses nanotechnology to do what I was saying, to do part of the process that gives you that result for context. And we expect that as we then create more Nano Splashes, more iterations. So same way you might think for iPhone, there's iPad, iPhone, iPod. Nano is really going to be a line of products. So in other words, for other diseases that we adapted to might be Nano Dash, for instance, Nano X, something along those lines. And so this really, again, it's going to be really a diagnostic of the future. And so we're looking to make it the next highest household item. So you got your wallet, your phone, you got your Nano Splash.
Yeah, so currently, no more the excuse to be like, don't worry about it. It's just an allergy. You go in the bathroom, you take this.
Right. Exactly.
I just went to CVS and got it. You take it and then let me see it.
Exactly. I mean, and it's going to help everybody. And I really see it. I know actually one element we haven't talked about in terms of the pandemic has been really hard, has been dating. Dating's been really hard for people. Everyone hates online dating. I think that's like a universal consensus. And, so it would be great if, you meet up with someone, you already have that one part of the conversation, okay, how safe am I? But another part of the conversation now is the COVID aspect, right? So before it's like, when was the last time you got tested for X? Now when was the last time you got tested for COVID? And so having, again, a quick test where, hey, let's meet up. And so regardless of the strands out, basically, okay, let's meet up, let's take a test. Okay, we're good to go. And at least it won't be, again, you have to wait a week, a couple of days, because as we all know, you get tested today, they say you're negative tomorrow, but in that 24 time period, you could have touched a keypad, someone could have sneezed and you inhaled one of those droplets, and so it's only loosely valid if it takes a while to get back to the results, if it takes a while to get back to you. So going back to Nano Splash, is that for us, we actually have our provisional patent now. We also have what's called a pre-EUA, which is in short a document from the FDA where they recognize the potential what you're doing, and they help you actually in the pathway to approval. So that's pretty great. And what else? We also, again, partner with Avomeen, AVOMEEN. And again, they're a lab that's used to FDA regulations. And so we've been able to really move a lot of testing forward at a really exciting pace. My team, props to my team, they've hit every milestone from the patent to the testing to pre-EUA, I mean, months and months and months in advance. So we actually were before anticipating that Nano Splash wouldn't even be out, so probably after the pandemic. But looking at things now, again, it's gonna be out by the end of the year in a few months. So I recommend everybody sign up for our charity dinner. It's gonna be June 26th. It's gonna be streamed online, so you don't have to be in Miami. Just watch it online. And again, we're just looking to help moms. So that's pretty much it.
Hey, Bob, you want to show part of the website so people get an idea? Conduit, conduitcomputing.com, but so people have a clear sense of, how to contact Ryan and his team and keep you have a newsletter. I know I signed up for the newsletter, right, but you'll be able to sign up for the newsletter that is there as well. So while he's pulling that up, tell us a little bit about what your feelings are in terms of people going out, and because all the masks are all being lifted now, because people are, they want to get back to some sense of what was normal. Right. But in the same sense, you have to admit that, it's probably the first time we've gone through a flu season. As my husband mentioned this to me the other day, first time we're going through a flu season where influenza wasn't a big deal for the first time because we were wearing masks. So, going forward, I mean, do you predict that we'll ever get back to the pre-pandemic time that people will not even think about it? Or is it the mask should always be in the pocket based on?
That's a really great question. And that's actually something that we, of course, doing what we do, really strongly investigate and consider all sides of. So in reality, if you look at history, things never go back to the way they were. Every major event, I mean, there's not really any major event you can look at and say, okay, well, then things went back to normal. Then things went back to normal. I'll use the easy example, use the US. Great Depression, after Great Depression, things weren't back to normal. After World War II, things weren't back to normal. After Vietnam, things weren't back to normal. So after every period, I mean, this is not how, I know it's very human for us to want things to be the same. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that and life moves on, for good or for bad. But it can be for good if you recognize that fact that the life moves on. And to that point is that, for instance, I'm here in Boston, and we just allowed for masks to no longer be required a few days ago, and people are still wearing masks. Not everybody, of course, but some people are. And my point is that this really has awakened what I call a health consciousness, a consciousness of our public health in a way that nothing's ever done before. Now, I think we all have, even now, when you meet somebody, you're relieved, right? You're a little less stressed, but you're still wondering, okay, did they get COVID? How was their COVID experience? Am I safe being around them? Oh, am I too close? It's awakened something in us, in the zeitgeist of our society, that isn't really going to go away. And part of that being because it's affected our economy. Things have become virtual now. Not everything, obviously, not everything, but I'm saying that part of it has gone virtual. So now you have a whole new population that's been exposed to a basically different lifestyle than before. So, for instance, if you look at New York, one of the big questions they're wondering is, are people going to move back to New York because it was so expensive? It's so expensive. People left, and so because other places weren't as expensive. They can do their job remotely. Not everybody, but again, some people. So you're exposing people to a new way of life. And you can even see it in our movies. I don't know if you guys, everyone's probably seen a movie in the last year, but you look at them and like, oh, they're not wearing masks. Oh my God, like they just did something that I would never do now. And so my point is that it's going to stay, but I think that what's really, really important for the future is education of the public, letting the public know that COVID, Corona has been here. I'm talking about COVID-19. I'm talking about the larger group of viruses that are called Corona. I'll pause there really quick. Corona actually is Latin for halo. So it means that when you're looking down at a microscope, the virus has spike proteins that they looked at as a halo, Corona halo. And so again, that group of viruses has been here for millions of years, for years and years.
Common cold.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I think what's most important, if you really, really look at the numbers, guys, is that a lot of the tragedy we've seen has come from the divisions inside our own. Part actually, we're going to the last question about the United States is because of the divisions we have in our country. Number one. Number two is just how poor our state of public health is. If you look at the death rate, a lot of the deaths have come from people that had pre-existing symptoms, which we all know, and that's like kind of the basic canon of this pandemic. And a lot of that's been from diabetes, for instance, that causes a lot of inflammation, that compromises your body. A lot of the deaths have come from your body attacking itself. It hasn't even literally been the virus; it's been your body attacking itself. Mm-hmm. And so there's a famous African proverb that I love, and I tell my team all the time. It says that there can be no enemy without if there's no enemy within. There can be no enemy without if there's no enemy within. So it really, what I would say as someone has a kind of a big picture of what's going on is that we really have to raise the standard of health, of happiness of our citizenry, of our population. Because when we've got to looking at mothers, I said mothers were our target demographic. Because before the pandemic, they were the most stressed out. They're the least supported, especially mothers of color, women of color. There's a long history behind that too. And so again, this pandemic just emphasized, it widened these fractures that already existed in our system or the lack thereof.
So we got a question on YouTube about Nano Splash, and it was basically about the price point. So would you like to respond to it?
Yeah, absolutely. So Nano Splash is definitely tend to be a household item. And in terms of pricing, it's gonna be pretty affordable. We're gonna be actually pricing it around $25. And again, like with the charity dinner, we plan on providing it for free as much as we can to people that can't really afford it. Especially just like I was saying, to the people that really need it, which again are going to be the mothers, but also for government agencies, the military, etc. So again, we have looked into that and made sure that it's pretty affordable, considering in mind that again, testing is going to be a recurring habit of ours now in the future.
So yeah, I think one of the things that we can correlate it to blockchain is like you're really decentralizing the testing, because right now it's very centralized. You've got to go to these specific agencies to get a confirmation, but sometimes if you think you may have it, but you don't particularly have a strand that will require you to be hospitalized, you don't actually want to show up and wait with a group of people, even if you're in your car, or be exposed to someone else that's testing you to make matters worse just because you just want a confirmation. So you're in a way decentralizing the testing for those people who are like, okay, I just want to check. Make sure this tickle in my throat or whatever what I've had for a couple of days doesn't. I don't want to be accused of spreading it to someone because I'm mostly asymptomatic.
Right.
But I could tell them with confidence. Yeah, it's just seasonal allergies. You mentioned earlier that you're on the cover of. We actually nabbed. Sorry, Shadrach. We actually nabbed the photo that they used for you on the cover of, but you sent it for our promotional material about it. Could you tell us about the feature Re-Engineer magazine and how that came about and some of the things, and where people can go to actually look for this feature?
Absolutely. So Re-Engineer is a magazine founded by Shadrach Steffens. I might be saying his last name wrong. I apologize, Shadrach, if I am. I always get Stevens and Steffens a little mixed up. Because we're like, no, it's Stevens, no, it's Steffens. Like, okay. But so hopefully I got it right. But Shadrach basically reached out and in short, I mean, we just had similar goals, with Conduit. Our tangible physical goal, of course, like I said, is to bring quantum to the masses, but on a larger level is really to help the world. And it's really to highlight talent. Talking about with Logan and the rest of my team, one thing that I'm really proud about for Conduit is it's a company you can come into, and whether you are high school educated or you went to MIT or what have you, you can come in and make a huge impact. You can make a huge, huge impact. For instance, one of our engineers, Ricky Williams, Harvard, to give him a shout out. I mean, in the first few months, he was working with some of the biggest supercomputers in the world, and then with the White House. You know, and then keep in mind, that's one benefit of a startup versus a big company, to be fair, but it's a great benefit. And because we plan on tackling big problems, it's something that we really see as a core of our company for a long time, is again, this ability for anyone to come in, apply their skill set to tackling these big problems. And so for Conduit, you know, we see it as, yes, we have our core team, but we also have a huge amount of support across the world. I mean, like you were saying, we have our newsletter, and that's got hundreds and hundreds of people, if not thousands. And I mean, I constantly get letters from people all across the world. So it's been pretty great. Thank you for putting the magazine up there. So the magazine itself, in the future, it talks about, in short, some of the questions we talked about now is, you know, quantum engineering, how did I get involved with it? What was really the origin story for us looking into the medical space? For me, I'll go over it a little briefly, is that, so for part of my story is that I had a cousin named Alice, who I loved. She was basically like a grandma to me. And she was the grandma you go over. She always has the food. There we go. She always has the food prepared for you and everything. She has too much food, you know, food that's, you know, you throw out, but she, you know, you guys, you know what I'm talking about. And so, Southern too, you know, so just good people, good food, good conversation. And I just loved being around her. And, but her thing was that she had cancer. She was a cancer survivor. And so she had beaten it. But the problem, and she went through her checkups, but the problem was she had gone back, this is months later, I mean, 8 months, 9 months after her surgery, where they said, you're good to go. And turns out that she still had it. She had had it the whole time. And so because she had it the whole time, it had festered untreated for, again, 8, 9 months. So at that point, they told her, listen, you've got a few months left to live. So after that, I mean, after that diagnosis, I mean, it just went downhill really quick. And so I know a lot of people watching this can relate. So I feel like a lot of us have had family, especially in the last year, family members that is like, what? You know, how? No way. You know, you just don't expect it. And so I went in to go see her, and I don't know if anyone's ever been in that type of situation, but you see it where your family member, you know, they can barely talk. They're barely there, and it's rough. It's really, really rough. So I was at this point, I want to say around 12, 13 years old. And it was challenging to me because, and I say this in the part of the magazine, is usually when, you know, we look at the news, we're like, oh, if someone passes away, it's like, okay, we kind of justify it. We try and say, okay, well, they were in the wrong part of town, or they were doing this wrong, or they shouldn't have been doing that. They should have been wearing their seatbelt or something like that. We always try and put something in and say that's why. But with her, it wasn't that, you know, she did what she was supposed to be doing. And really what ended up happening is that the machines so she lived in a lower income area down in Miami. And with that is, I mean, the hospital, the healthcare access wasn't really there in the same way. And that goes again, going back to what I was saying, the fractures in society that the pandemic has exacerbated, and you see the parallels. So it wasn't the reason that they caught it 8 months later, because they had just updated their machines. So machines were more sensitive and can see, okay, the cancer was still there. So it wasn't, again, that she did the wrong things or et cetera. We could point at something. It was that the system, if you will, the lack of healthcare, the lack of constant innovation, the lack of the equipment being there at the right time, cost her life. And even though she didn't have anything to really do with that. So that had a huge influence on me, because it just made me very aware of the everyday person, particularly a person that actually to Hin's question, she asked about affordability, that was one of the first things we looked at, was how do we make sure that the person, regardless of their income, as much as we can afford this test. That's why we're doing a charity dinner to, you know, again, raise funding for free COVID testing as much as possible, is because we always keep that in mind, is how do we impact the people? Even in our vision, like I said, is to bring quantum to the masses.
Wow.
I want to ask you about your process. So Nano Splash as an example. So it's a great product because it has a very specific use and it solves a very specific problem. And so how did you go from the quantum realm Sorry, Marvel, you don't get to own that. In terms of your quantum realm, in terms of understanding this technology, and then working through narrowing down to what's the pathway to then turn this into a product.
Oh man.
In 2 minutes. In 2 minutes.
So that's a great question. That's like the movie question. When you guys watch this in the movies, like, years later, like, how do okay, this happened and that happened and this. So, but to answer the question specifically is, we looked at, okay, what's possible. I was talking about the limitations of quantum computing.
Mm-hmm.
So usually when we're talking about limitations, specifically people in the field, we might say, okay, it's 10 years out, it's 20 years out, it's 25 years out. So you have this sort of sense of what's possible within this time frame. Mm-hmm. Again, keep in mind that assumes a certain rate of development, if you will. So it's not really accurate. Things can happen, the innovations, discoveries, breakthroughs, et cetera. But you have a sense of, where things are going to go. So with that, I looked at, okay, how, what can we do in a more immediate sense? So say something that might take 10 years or 10 years future would be future in 10 years. How can we do that in a year, 2 years, 3 years? So in other words, how can we bring the future to the present, and within the scope of not something that's so futuristic that it takes a long time to develop? And we can still do that. That's going to be some of our long-term projects, but something, again, that's maybe 5 years out, 10 years out, futuristic, and then make that happen in 1 or 2 years. And you'll see this, for instance, if you study, any of the quote unquote the greats, like Einstein. Actually, I'll mention specifically Cloud Shannon, MIT alum as well. He did a lot of biology research in genetics. Long story short, biographers, they brought his research to scientists, biologists now in the late, he lived in the 1940s and 30s, and they brought it to scientists at the end of the 20th century. And he said, he didn't publish a lot of his work. And so they said, what happened if this guy had published this work, at the time that he was around? He said, well, it would have pushed the field forward 50 years, wow, at least. At least. So that's kind of the same thing you would look at, okay, how futuristic is this, and how can we, again, compress that and make that happen now? Mm-hmm. So it's really, really exciting. And again, my team, Logan, Ricky, Ebony Stepney, and a bunch of others. And now I got to name all of them. John Brown, Dana, Joanna Lugo, man, it is Ankush, Tamer. I feel like I'm on like doing like the Grammy speech right now. Who else is there? I know I'm gonna forget somebody too. Give me a second. It's in there. Tamer, Ankush, Logan, all of our investors, of course, all our family and friends, of course, especially the partners of everybody on the team. Those are the real, they're the ones supporting us in the background, sacrificing the time and attention. But the White House team, I have to give my props to. So.
But we can't end this without asking a futuristic question.
Okay.
So the standard interview question: where do you see Conduit in 5 years from now? It's not that far into the future, 5 to 10 years from now. What are some product areas that you want to see the company get into beyond the diagnostic of like RNA uses?
Well, honestly, I really, we're just gonna blow up. I mean, you've seen it already in terms of like the expansion of the company and how more people have understood us and we've gotten more press, et cetera. Is in 5 years, really, I expect in the next year, we're really gonna be a household name. Already, if anyone, if I speak for the United States, whether I'm in Boston, Florida, and Las Vegas, people recognize Conduit. Again, they might not know what exactly we do with the whole quantum thing, but I've heard that name before. I've heard it before, and et cetera. So household name is number one. Number two is really being with that, being a brand not only people recognize in kind of like a Coca-Cola type way, but a really brand that people can be proud of. That's really important. I think in this era, we really need people to look up to, companies to look up to, groups of people to look up to, scientists to look up to, especially scientists, because we've been treating our scientists wrong for a little while now. So especially scientists of color and engineers of color. So I really hope that we're getting with our brand that it's a unifying, a banner for all people, all colors, all groups to, again, work on the hardest problems in the world. So that's on a brand level. On a product level is, really you're going to see stores full of Conduit products. It's going to be eventually Conduit aisles, and then we'll soon have Conduit stores selling specifically Conduit products. Specifically, you're going to see Conduit Nano Splash products, specifically with testing, medical testing, getting you tests that are easy to use, that are fast, that you can trust. So you don't have to go to the grocery store, okay, I don't want to put some in my nose, but I also want to use something that I can know that will work. And then finally, you'll start to see what I call the quantum personal computer, which again is that platform, which is going to allow for multiple use cases of quantum and of nano that anyone can use to connect with people in a deeper way, get more work done, be more productive, and just really, I think, have a fuller experience of life.
Wait, back up. That little last part, I can't conceptualize that. You're saying you want to do some type of a computer device?
No, so it's going to look like something totally different than what you expect. It's not going to even look like a computer. We're going to be reimagining what the computer looks like. The same look at Abacus. Like, Abacus is a computer.
Right.
But we don't
Right.
think of it as a computer.
It is.
We think of it as a computer.
Right.
So
right.
yeah, so it's really exciting. It's really exciting. Anyone who doesn't know about Conduit now, I'd recommend looking at us now before we get too big.
You'll never be too big for us, though.
Guys, keep that music coming, that intro.
He's talking to Gail King now. He don't have time. Yes, he'll make time.
So, I'm dying to ask about the $100 worth of Bitcoin that you got in 2014.
Oh, that's right. Where did you spend
and all your classmates?
Oh man,
where did you spend it?
You know what, guys? I'm gonna be totally honest with you guys. I'm one of those people. I told you I think about how things work. Mm-hmm. I was thinking about it so much that I didn't actually redeem mine.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I'm like one of those people. I miss the deadlines for everything. It's awful. It's awful. But I had other friends spend on pizza, so hey.
So you don't feel bad.
Yeah, I don't feel too bad.
Right.
I don't feel too bad.
You know, it's always a learning experience. Well, as always, it's great having you.
Likewise, thanks, guys.
Thank the question from Hin and certainly the magazine drop from Shadrach, so we can get some more information about your process and also Conduit in general. And then, definitely keep sending those who are not on the newsletter, definitely go to conduitcomputing.com and sign up for the newsletter. This is how this interview came about. It's not, intermittently, he'll even send just sometimes a link or something like that gets you thinking about what's going on. So we really enjoyed connecting the dots between quantum and crypto, as well as quantum and COVID in particular, and disease in general. And then hopefully it'll make all of our lives a lot easier and less reliant on kind of decentralizing our own health to an extent. Right. And knowing for being confident in the products that an American company can create, that this attests to this is my health situation, and hopefully get into treatment as well. So any last words you'd like to share?
I would say if you are alive right now, guys, just appreciate it. Appreciate the fact that you're alive. Actually, my team meetings context, we always end with words of wisdom. So my words of wisdom for everybody here is, if you're alive, you're seeing this, you're observing this, you're taking this in, just appreciate the fact that you're alive. I mean, I think hopefully what the pandemic taught us on the positive side is that life is precious. Life should never be taken for granted. Everyone's life is important, regardless of how much money you make, regardless of what you look like. Everyone's life is important, regardless of what you've done in the past. Everyone is important on a deep level, on the fact that you exist and you're the only you. So fulfill the potential that you were given in this world. Take your gifts to the ultimate level, but use it to serve your fellow man, fellow woman, fellow everybody, fellow humanity. But again, at the end of the day, appreciate your gifts, but the fact that you are alive.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Okay.